Welcome back to Open Line. Tonight we are talking about affordable housing, and we thank you for being with us. By the way, if you've been trying to call in, thank you first of all. Our phone lines are down right now, but we're trying to get those repaired. So give it a few minutes and give us another try. We'll see if we can get it working tonight. But I've enjoyed the conversation. I'm learning a lot more about affordable housing and the outlook for it in our community. And you know, I've been here 6 years, and we've been talking about this just for 6 years plus. I know the conversation's been going on much longer than that. But there seems to be more steam building behind it, an urgency. Do you all feel that?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I started out making the statement when we really kicked off the task force is we're in a crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, it just needs to be addressed as what it is. And, you know, the gap is widening, right? In terms of if we were at a place where we weren't quite happy and satisfied and we knew we need to make improvements, over the past 6 years, that's only gotten worse.
Yeah.
And it's become more difficult by economic forces, but also it's just become more difficult in terms of just how to manage all of the moving parts and pieces. I think we really have to understand that we can't just amplify what we were doing and say, okay, well, we're a little better, so it'll get a little better. No, we have to really take some leaps and bounds forward if we're going to try to minimize the impacts of really the elevation and success of our city from an economic standpoint. But as it relates to housing, we've got to complement that with the growth and strategies and really have a pretty robust toolkit in terms of how we're going to attack the problem. And I think we're doing that. I think we're doing that.
Are there any great examples out there of how cities have handled this on their own and done well, or done really poorly and we don't want to go down that path?
Ooh.
I know.
So one of the things that I've noticed looking at different cities about it, all of the really sort of often the really exciting investments in affordable housing are always from cities that seem to be further down the affordable housing crisis than we are. So you hear these great stories that might be going on other places, like a big announcement in Seattle or something like that, which is even more unaffordable than we are here. It's kind of like maybe it's the tree analogy. The best time to plant a tree was yesterday or 30 years ago. And I think that all the cities are trying to figure out ways to do it, and we're all sort of struggling with the same sorts of, okay, how do we put the resources here to create these housing opportunities for everyone?
Yeah.
I would pick up on that and say, I think Mick nailed it. There's a lot of places that have been further along this curve, so to speak, of needing to address affordability. And so I think we have the luxury of being able to look to some of those places. And a lot of those places, they had a task force, right? And they decided to assess where they were, which we've, put in place a recommendation to create a database. And then they've also been a little bit bold in terms of what their recommendations are, and just admitting that it's a crisis or at a standpoint or at a point where it really needs to be a priority, and taking some bold steps. And I think that's exactly what our task force did as well. So I think we are following in the footsteps of some cities and municipalities that have identified the issue and taken some steps to move forward. And as Mick addressed earlier, this administration has taken some of those recommendations already and started to enact them. So I do think we're starting to follow the footsteps of others who said we're going to make a change, and we know we have to take some action.
Yeah, and it's not just baby steps. Like, we need to run at this point, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to pick your brain a little bit further on this Barnes Fund, because again, I've been here 6 years. We've talked about affordable housing a lot. We've talked about the Barnes Fund a lot, and yet I feel like for a lot of people it remains this mystery.
Yeah,
you've explained it some. It works with nonprofits.
Yeah.
What would be those nonprofits? Is it like Habitat for Humanity, those sorts of things? What are some other ones that would jog people's mind and make it all make sense?
I'll try and list off a few. So Habitat for Humanity has definitely been a beneficiary and put those into creating home ownership opportunities. I know we talk a lot about rental, but we're not only focused on rental in the task force or what the Barnes Fund does. The organization that Ed was the chair of, Rebuilding Together Nashville,
I know I terribly put you on the spot.
Yeah, with urban housing.
Urban Housing Solutions, Woodbine Community Organization,
absolutely.
Be a Helping Hand, New Level CDC, Project Return. Plenty of organizations across Nashville have been beneficiaries.
And perhaps it provides, and correct me, please stop me, it gives them the money to buy land so they can then build? What is the money goes towards?
Across the spectrum. I will say from acquisition, whether it is rehabilitation or new construction. And all of those are important pieces, but also I think, speaking for Rebuilding Together Nashville, we actually went to the Barnes Fund, the committee, and said, hey, well, what about homeowner preservation? Because it was primarily for rental product. I hope I'm not misspeaking there. It was primarily for rental product for a while, but I think that created yet another avenue.
Yeah.
And so you now have the opportunity for people who are homeowners, but again have been struggling as the city continues to become more expensive. That also impacts them from their ability from a utility cost as well as just maintenance cost. I mean, construction prices increase.
Yes.
That flows all the way through any and every part of affordable housing as well. And so as we recognize that actually happening, we understand that all of those market factors are impacting affordable housing. And so the challenge continues to mount. And so every time you hear of an issue that someone may be having, you probably can take that ripple effect and move it to affordable housing.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you guys for making that make more sense, because I like dispelling the mysteries of what is the Barnes Fund.
Yeah.
You know, is it funded enough? I've been told it's terribly underfunded.
I think that's absolutely, well, yeah, the more the merrier. The as we, sort of, if you put the money out there, the opportunities will come. And someone who helps out organizations on the grant writing side, you're not going to write or put together a project for all that time and effort unless it's likely to get funded.
Yeah.
And so as I think the mayor announced an additional $12 million for a total of $22 million this coming year in the Barnes Fund, and really excited about the impact that's going to make across. And I think it's going to be the more that we can invest, the more units we'll create and preserve. And one of the really great things about it, going to your question, and sort of Ed touched on it beautifully, is the great thing about it, it's flexible funding. It doesn't have it, you're just defined this is, it's doing this full homeowner rehab, homeowner creation opportunities like the habitats and the affordable housing resources, to rental preservation, to new construction. The whole gamut is being funded by the Barnes Fund, which is kind of what we need, because it's not like you can create widgets of affordable housing. They all happen in a specific location with a specific place. The parcel may be a quarter acre or it might be 5 acres. The timing of it is all flexible, what you can do there, the zoning. So having a flexible funding source like the Barnes Fund is something that can really make a big difference.
There is not one fit all that's going to get us out of this, right?
Exactly. Not at all.
I want to get back to these recommendations. We went through some of them. Others are less specific. Like the state's got to change some rules, right? The state's got to work with us here. How so?
Well, I think one big thing, and you mentioned this, and a lot of people would disagree, but one of the things that our city had pursued was to have voluntary inclusionary zoning. And other cities that have, as Mick mentioned, kind of further along on that bell curve and have really struggled with affordable housing, they put out some form of inclusionary zoning. And essentially it is a form of a mandate and or voluntary participation in a program that will allow for usually more density, so you can densify.
Gotcha.
And because of that, there's a trade-off. And some of your units are more affordable. And so Nashville, for instance, if this was in place and you see all these nice shiny buildings that are coming up, a lot of them that are multifamily developments, they would have a portion, varying number of units that would be in the affordable range, and those are usually determined by that area median income that we were talking about. So, those households that bring in, $67,000 or below, these would be units that were, for lack of a better term, reserved for people who qualify based on their income. And so it's just it's putting a system in place that you need affordable housing. As the wheels churn and as the city grows, you kind of have a mechanism for those being produced. And I think that's one big thing. But the state did not necessarily agree with the city's approach there. And so that was been repealed, and now I think it's technically illegal based on state law. But I think the other things in that space is, well, there are other tools. So we do have transit-oriented development. I think this is a win for the city. We have to work with the state on how to best implicate those types of things. And then again, funding, right? So our state knows that Nashville is definitely a regional hub. It's a driver for a lot of economic prosperity. How is that recognized and complemented in a way that it can be leveraged by the city to produce more affordable housing? That's an economic benefit to all of those large relocations and small. And so to continue to be a business-friendly state, how do we make that case that Nashville is a business-friendly city, and affordable housing is a big piece of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Invest in MDHA's Envision development. Talk about that one.
Yeah, so one of the really exciting things going on in the city is the revitalization and the Envision process with the large public housing neighborhoods across Nashville. And one of the legacies is they turned out to be all in fantastic locations.
Absolutely.
And so we have this opportunity to create higher quality housing for the people that are living there right now, while also making better use of that space. You know, updating the buildings that aren't the layout's kind of squirrely and strange and not how it would be built today, and also adding density there, and adding keeping all of the public housing units there, and then adding a layer of sort of affordable and workforce housing on top of that, as well as some market rate housing, all there to have a fully mixed income community. And so we don't have an opportunity in this city quite like partnering with MDHA to create higher quality, affordable housing at scale. And so it's sort of, in many ways, a no-brainer of an investment if we care about affordable housing to help put the resources to help make that happen and happen more quickly.
How doable is that in a short-term span?
Well, I think two things. One, what MDHA has done here is a model for how other cities and municipalities could do it and are starting to try to emulate. One of the hardest things is to acquire the land.
Yeah.
And we also talk about the economics of building now. And as Mick just said, they have really great land. And by great land, they're in really good locations. They're easily marketable. And so for that appeal of a market rate product to help kind of offset and balance out the cost, MDHA is located in great places. So the feasibility is there. It makes economic sense. The dollars would just supercharge the process. Right now, MDHA is essentially they're self-developing, and so they're bound by their free cash flow. And so when you inject dollars, just like with the Barnes Fund, you allow for a greater capacity of development. I think that it's a really good opportunity for the city. And again, we talked about not just housing, but you talk about the amenities and the amenitizing it, and you have a steward that has a commitment to also amenitizing these spaces at a mixed income level. Again, you know, you have all the people, all the diversity that we have in the city and what they need, and you have these campuses, so to speak, that will start to encompass a lot of those things, from schools to grocery stores to parks to transit options, multimodal transit options. And so I think they're really the best proving ground that we have to really jumpstart. I mean, 45,000, as you asked, was it possible? That's a big number.
It is.
Without using these, it becomes nearly impossible. I mean, these need to be leveraged heavily to accomplish that goal.
So this is a big recommendation on the list. We have to make this partnership happen, basically.
Absolutely.
Would you call it a partnership?
I think that's the best way to look at it. Yeah,
very much so. Very much so.
All right. On that note, I got to take another break. We're going to squeeze in another segment right after this.